Hey, jazz lovers, back with another interview today. I'm very excited to have one of my very closest and dearest friends and um, musical compatriots, whatever the correct
Yeah,
word is.
yeah.
My man, Stevie D, Steve
Man,
Davis.
Rubes, man.
Great
Thank
to
you.
have
So
you
good
here,
to see
Steve.
you.
Yes.
And thanks for taking some time to talk, man.
Man, thank you for taking
Yeah.
time and coming here and
It's my pleasure, man.
yeah, man. So, sure a lot of people know about you, but I'd like to get into a little bit. I look at this as a little bit of learning for some people that are getting into the music as well.
Of course, yeah.
To see how other people got into it.
It's
We all
great.
have our own little story.
That's great.
Yeah,
And that never ends.
yeah,
And it's funny you mentioned this right off the bat because I just saw several quotes by all of our heroes.
Mm.
Train, Sonny Rollins. I can't remember how many times in the last week I've seen this very phrase come up and heard it discussed.
Mm.
That it never ends. That the pursuit of music and musical knowledge and artistry and expression, it's so wonderful and vast
Yeah,
that you could never possibly get to all of it and really understand everything there is to know about music, like life,
Yeah.
like the earth,
Mhm.
whatever analogy you can think of. So it's really a pleasure these days to reflect a little bit
Yeah,
on it all and talk about it.
yeah. I know sometimes with me it doesn't feel like that much time has passed, but then you kind of look at the date and you say, shit.
I know. It's funny. It's 2024,
Yeah,
and I know just a couple months back we were talking and realizing that your record From the Inside Out
yeah,
on Sharp 9 Records,
yeah,
which features Carl Allen
yeah,
and Nat Reeves and Bruce Barth
yeah.
in the rhythm section,
Yourself, yeah.
and you and me. And that was 30 years ago,
It's gonna be 30 years.
1994. And I'm so proud of that date. And then all of the recordings we've made together. And I think you're on 8 of my albums, or I don't know.
think
I
so.
lost track. It's
I think so.
and we have more to do. That's the
Yeah.
beautiful part is
Yeah,
we have many, as the great Larry Willis, our dear friend and great pianist and composer, would say, we have many choruses yet to play.
that's right.
So
Yeah, man.
I look forward to all of it, Mike.
Me too, man. And publicly, I'm gonna say thank you for including me in a lot of that stuff, man.
Oh man,
It's so for
thank
me,
you.
you're one of the cats that when I learn one of your pieces of music, I feel like I'm that much better as a musician. I've always felt that way.
Thank you, man.
You-
That's quite a compliment.
I hold David Hazeltine in that regard with his music, man.
Yeah,
It's just-
same here.
Once it's like
Yeah.
it's like a map that you learn how to navigate to get
Yeah.
someone through someone's idea of chord changes, and
Yes.
it's like it's all a little bit different, So
Yeah, I mean, we were talking a little just a few minutes ago off camera about writing and our influences. Of course, Jackie McLean
Yeah.
is a huge influence on both of us. And J-Mac had such a creative spirit to his composing and playing, and everything he did musically, as a band leader, as an educator. I mean, all of it.
yeah,
But especially when he wrote, you always felt him. I don't know, pushing for, searching for
Yeah.
something beyond the typical.
yeah,
And that was a very, very big influence for me when I was a student in the late 80s, mid to late 80s in Hartford. And just literally being there watching him compose. Like I watched him compose the tune A Calling.
Mm.
And I watched him a few years later. I was now a young teacher in the program at age 24. My first year, he brought me in back from New York. I'd been down here a few years, and he was writing "Rhythm of the Earth,"
Wow. Yeah.
and you know, it's just etched in my mind. And he would actually ask Alan Palmer, the you know, our friend and colleague, and then his pianist for many years. And you know, we were all so young, but Alan and I and Eric McPherson, the great EMAC, were in the band. Nat Reeves, of course.
Yeah.
Renee McLean, when he was back from South Africa, and then he'd be in the band. And then later Raymond Williams,
Yeah.
who I just talked to just within the last week.
Dr. Rackle.
Dr. Rackle, he's in New Orleans doing great
Yeah.
back home. But, you know, J-Mac would ask our opinion. He'd ask, what do y'all think? You know, should I go up or down? And I could show you on the keyboard, on Rhythm of the Earth.
Yeah.
And it was for a young cat, you know, it was really overwhelming to say, is he really asking me? Like, what should he do here? But you know, he wanted your youthful energy, maybe even naivete. He wanted that spark, you know. That he was staying tapped into the young energy of the music. And I remember once at the Vanguard, I had been in the band for a period of years, and I was finally in my mid-20s or so, starting to feel like I think I can kind of play now. And I took a solo on the tune of Calling, and I felt pretty good about it for a change, you know. And he sort of peeped it, and he said, yeah, man. And I noticed he wasn't as encouraging as usual. He said, yeah, man, Bebop City. Look, we're standing there. And I think the implication was, okay, son, that was a good solo. What else you got?
Right.
Now, you got another gear now? He was pushing me.
Yeah.
And when I really was scuffling for the previous years, you know, he would tell me that I sounded beautiful, and if you ever go for an idea and you crack a note, nobody knows but you. And I asked him once, I said, you know, I feel like I'm just not making it sometimes, J-Mac, and what should I work on? And he looked at me and said, just let go. Just let go.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you, J-Mac. You know, he didn't say you should, you know, practice your, you know, Lydian dominant scales in all 12 keys.
Yeah.
That was not the advice. I mean, I'm sure that's helpful.
Yeah.
But no, he said just let go. And
how? Not what? Like,
yeah. And he always encouraged me, and he always said, you got that nice breathy sound. And you know, he kind of gave me the confidence to use my sound, to think about your sound. And he instilled, and I know, Mike, you being a student of his and being around him as much as you were, that you got this from him too. I remember, and I hear it, I've heard it for 30-some years, and you're playing, that I think he gave us a conviction, a fire about playing this music, and a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And also a sense of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Being an improviser, that it's not, you're not supposed to know everything exactly.
Yeah.
That's part of the beauty of it, is you discover things along the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just walked past the Vanguard earlier, and all these memories came back, and I knew I was going to be seeing you, and
Yeah,
I love it, man.
Not about being perfect, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And I've struggled with that over the years, because you know, early on I got the great J.J. Johnson in my head, and I saw him many times, and his recordings are so immaculate. And you know, for those who might not be as familiar, for trombonists, J.J. Johnson is our bird. He's our Charlie Parker, but he did it in his own unique way.
Yeah.
And his playing was so immaculate and precise that I always wanted to try to rise up to that level.
Yeah.
But I'm not him. Nobody is.
Yeah.
And you know, the great Curtis Fuller, who I met through Jackie McLean as well, and he was so encouraging to me, and
Yeah.
I remember you and I going to his house once.
Exactly.
Yeah, and to visit Curtis, and he always told me, well, he said, with the years I was playing in Jackie's band, he said, you got the hippest gig in town, kid,
Mm.
and you got it. And he said, I hear my influence in you, I hear Jay's influence in you, and Slide, he said, but you you're your own guy, just do your thing, and all of that will be in there, but you got your own, and that was a heck of a thing, for him to
Yeah.
offer to me way back when, and what a big help, and I knew, as much as I wanted to play, and do at times play Curtis Fuller isms on the trombone, there were so many things that I would love to be able to play. I can't, I technically can't do it. So
Yeah.
I realized, rather than struggle trying to copy my hero, you have to kind of weed out some things and say, you know what, that's for Curtis. He did that. I got to do something else.
Yeah.
And edit my playing a little bit and try to find my own way through it.
We've talked about this before, where I've mentioned to you, I could probably, I don't know, maybe on two hands name the solos that I've tried to learn over the years. In other words, transcribe. And not writing out, but learning.
Yeah.
And I would start doing this, but then I'd always get on a tangent.
Yeah.
Once you feel like you're kind of in the mind of that person, that whether it's Bird or Sonny Rollins or Bud Powell.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the same thing too. It wasn't so much going through this whole solo. Can you talk about that a little bit,
Mike?
Steve?
That's a great point, man. I know, as an educator, we've been teaching for decades now. I've been an educator on the college level for 33 years.
Wow.
I don't know how that happened, but excuse me. And so, of course we talk about and genuinely encourage transcription, but I've never actually pushed that much on my students, to your point. Honestly, I've transcribed exactly 3 solos, start to finish, in my entire life. On paper, I mean.
Yeah.
Or even, and it was because I had to, for Professor Pete Woodard.
Oh, okay.
One semester at Hart.
He must have been strict there back then.
We love you, Professor Woody.
That's right.
And I wrote out 2 J.J. Johnson solos and a Dexter Gordon solo.
Okay.
And learned them. But I already had been singing them and trying to play certain phrases. But mostly, almost entirely, the way I learned to play was by listening and listening and listening and just absorbing the whole of the music. And then, what was that? Okay, that thing right there that Dexter plays, or Hank Mobley plays, or Cedar plays here, or whoever it may be, not necessarily trombone. It could be Jay or Curtis or who Frank Rosolino, whoever.
Yeah.
You hear something and say, man, I like that. But mostly Lee Morgan. I could go on and on. All the people you would expect. And you would kind of pick a phrase that you thought, well, I think I can play this. And you kind of would hear where it fits in a certain song form or whatever. But mostly, I started hearing my own version of all of this language. And then just trying to, once that spark happens, and you start as a young student, young musician, you start to realize, hey, I think I get this. There's a logic, there's just a I don't know how, like a frequency or a wave or that a flow,
Yeah.
a lyrical flow that you get into, and harmonic flow and rhythmic flow,
Mhm.
and then you start to create your own version of things, but it's inspired by all these great musicians that you
Yeah.
either hear in person, ideally,
Yeah.
or on record, and then your peers and the cats you're coming up with, that
Yeah.
you're playing with, and that never stops, all of it.
Yeah.
And then but more and more, I really, over the years, I stopped ever trying to intentionally copy anything.
Mhm.
I would think about the harmony,
Mm.
and then what feels good to play here for me on my horn.
Mhm.
What can I execute that I have some control over, and I don't sound like I'm flailing around or copying somebody.
Mm.
And of course, I'm going to play things that
Yeah.
that remind you of JJ
Mhm.
or Curtis Fuller. It's inescapable,
Exactly.
you know. But mostly, I didn't do a lot of, note for note transcribing
Mhm.
necessarily. It's important to sing along with your favorite records. Try to sing everything you play.
I guess it also depends on where you are in your development, right? So, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go back now because you started in a different area, but your upbringing was different than mine. I mean, I realized at some point, early on at University of Hartford, I'm saying to myself, you know, the cats that grew up listening, like the cats with bigger record collections sound better, and that's when I realized, like, I need to go out and get more of it because I didn't have that my upbringing.
Oh, man. Yeah, sure.
So
yeah,
what
yeah.
was yours like, Steve? What was your early days of music
Wow.
growing up? And where did I know you moved around a lot. You want to talk
Yeah.
a little bit about where you're from?
Sure.
and all that
I won't go too
Yeah.
into detail, but
Yeah.
first of all, it's really interesting how we all come to this
Mhm.
music, and everybody has their own path
Yeah.
to it, and there's no right way or correct way or
Right.
one way, not at all. And some people come from musical families, other people are the only musician in the entire family,
Exactly.
and it really just depends, For me, I would say I was very fortunate to grow up in a household where my parents both loved music. My father, in particular, was an avid record collector, newspaper writer, reporter, journalist, But he just an avid jazz, blues, and rock and roll fan, mostly. A little bit of classical music, or not much though, or maybe some mountain music, bluegrass once in a while.
Okay. Yeah.
He listens to a lot of different things, but he had a lot of blues, Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Buddy Guy, Otis Rush, Albert King, and then rock and roll, Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Oh man, I devoured his Rolling Stones collection when I got old enough to,
Yeah.
But he had the Blue Note records and a lot of jazz recordings. And so when my ears were kind of ready,
Yeah.
at about 14 years old, we were away on vacation for a week up on Cape Cod, and again the radio was on. It was kind of staticky, and this music came on, and I was sitting with him. He was smoking a cigar or a pipe. He used to do that, and I said, "What's that? What's that music?" He said, "Oh, you've heard this before at home." I said, "I have." Yeah, he said, "That's Lee Morgan. That's the Sidewinder." He said, I think his phrase was, that was funk before funk. And he said, "You like that, huh?" I said, Yeah, wow. He said, "Okay, well, I'll make you a list." And he wrote it on a little notebook. Lee Morgan, he what else did he have? Hank Mobley, A Caddy for Daddy. Lee Morgan, Cornbread. Horace Silver, the Cape Verdean Blues. Trombonist, there's J.J. Johnson. That was my introduction to J.J.
Wow.
And I went, that's a trombone, you know.
Yeah.
And on Nutville, and then that was it, game over. And then Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, Ugetsu, Curtis Fuller on trombone. That's a trombone, you know. So I was very lucky. And then Freddie Hubbard recordings, Backlash, the one on Atlantic, and I'm trying to think of the early, my go-to records, Blue Mitchell, Boss Horn. You get the idea. And
did you have free reign to go play those records from his collection? Or
he sat me down, and for the young kids who. Vinyl's made a comeback, right?
Yeah.
Which is cool. My father made me learn how to take the album out, so you hold it like this, you don't get your fingerprints on it, and use the dust thing, and put the little stuff on it, and oh man, it was a ritual. And then when you put the albums back, you put it in the sleeve, but don't leave the sleeve so the record can fall out.
Exactly.
You got to put it up this way, and put it back in, and you put the record on, and he had these big clunky headphones, so oftentimes I'd put on the headphones and just sit in a chair, look at the cover, read the liner notes, look at any pictures that there might be, and just listen. And dream and listen. And then I started making cassettes, mixes, when that became the thing. And so you could fit on a 90-minute cassette, say like, I'm going to make a Wayne Shorter. And it was Speak No Evil and Juju on either side. But the first thing I did was make, I liked all of the first tracks on the Blue Note records, like Cornbread, or A Caddy for Daddy, or,
all the opening tracks.
The Rump Roller, Lee Morgan, or, you know, the jukebox tunes, or as Larry Willis called it, the Get the Money tunes, and the Boogaloos, and the funky tunes, Cornbread, you know. And so I had a cassette of all of those tunes, but then I'd have some space at the end, and then a tune like Wayne Shorter's Etta, or Most Likely, or one of the other songs that I was ready to start delving into. They're a little more complex, and I just kept listening. And Dexter Gordon I listened to a lot. My dad had Modern Jazz Quartet records. I mean, we could go on and on. So I was lucky about that, of course. And then my grandparents, my Nana, my mom's mother, played stride piano. And she didn't read a note of music. She never read in her whole life. She just played Honeysuckle Rose and Them Their Eyes and Embraceable You. She could really play. She was the jazz musician in my family. And we'd go visit her.
That's your dad's mom?
That was my mom's mom.
Your mom's mom?
Yeah, my Nana. And Betty Clark Munger. And then my grandfather on my grandfather on my dad's side, he played the trumpet as a hobby. He was a newspaper man is an outdated term these days, but a journalist, and so print journalist, and so he used to take out the trumpet, and he'd put it on his, put his elbow on his knee, and he'd belt out, Sweet Georgia Brown, and he used to play the ocarina.
Oh yeah.
The sweet potato, he called it.
Oh wow.
He'd belt that out, and then he'd get the basting brushes out that you baste a turkey with, and on one of those red and white checkered tablecloths, and he'd play brushes. He was swinging, man.
Yeah.
He loved Duke Ellington. That was he loved Duke, and he loved Basie, and he loved Glenn Gray and the Casa Loma Orchestra. He loved that big band. So, there was an appreciation, and Louis Armstrong, of course, and so it wasn't like I was studying Duke Ellington as a kid. I wasn't. It was just around.
Exposed to it.
And I heard my Nana play Satin Doll, and she played it in F.
Hmm.
I don't know why. So when I started playing trombone, much later, I didn't get to trombone until I was 14, 15, because I played trumpet, baritone horn, tuba, then finally trombone.
Okay.
And so I was a real latecomer and very behind technically and kind of a barbarian a little bit, you know. And we'd go visit my Nana and she'd be playing Satin Doll. And I have a cassette tape where I'm learning Satin Doll in F.
Mm.
I had no idea. I was just playing what I heard. And so when I look back on all this, it's an incredible gift
Wow.
to have that in my family.
Yeah.
I was really lucky. And my mom, man, my little brother and I, we'd be in the car running errands or taking a trip with Mom. Oh man, my mother played the radio all the time, and she would find the oldies station. So I heard all the 50s hits and the 60s hits, and she'd sing along, and her enthusiasm for music was infectious, you know.
Yeah.
And so by the time I got into any kind of serious, you know, idea of jazz, and then toward the end of high school, and then coming to Hartford and meeting Jackie McLean, you know. The other thing too, in Binghamton, New York, where I grew up, we had a lot of great musicians. I've told you all about this. Tony Cadlick, the great trumpeter, Dina DeRose, the great singer and vocalist, Chris Jensen, our friend and great saxophonist, John Hollenbeck, a great drummer and composer, Tom Dempsey, great guitarist, and other friends of mine, Tim Lynch, Jamie Kresge, Mark Kissinger. They all wound up getting smart and doing other things like being vice president of Michigan University in Tim Lynch's case, or Mark Kissinger working for the state of New York, you know, advising the governor on health care policy, or Jamie Kresge, for a long time he worked for Capital One and designed all the handheld apps for Capital One in Richmond, Virginia. I mean, we're talking smart cats. And they all played, you know, piano, trombone, trumpet, respectively, and could have been musicians. So I was lucky to be around some really... Sherry Miracle, the great drummer who founded the Diva Big Band. She was a little older and went to a different school district, but... And many other great musicians and great teachers, Al Hom, Bernie Schifrin, Doug Beardsley, who ran a jam session at a place called the Music Box. And I could go on and on. Al Thompson, Tom Mann, Don Mayola, Conrad Ross. We had a lot of guidance and encouragement.
So by the time you settled on trombone, were you able, were you able to be in a jazz band in school? Was it like something that you get together once a week?
Yeah, eventually I did, and I forgot to mention one of the most important friends and musicians. He's still in Binghamton, Maurice Taylor, Reese T.
Reese, I've met
And he does the Binghamton University Pep Band. You've probably seen him on ESPN on TV, and he does radio shows. He MCs. I mean, he does all kinds of stuff, musical things in Binghamton. He played trombone, so I was sitting next to him, and he had some serious chops, man, and I still does. So, but yeah, we were encouraged to jam and improvise. And it was still kind of a renegade thing to do.
I see.
It wasn't in the curriculum.
Yeah.
At all. It was study hall, and
there was a big band then.
We had a big band,
but not small group.
It was called the stage band.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Not small group situations, not at all. That was just us.
That was just on your own.
Just on our own. Totally.
And were you playing any piano at this point?
No.
Not at all.
No.
Wow.
That didn't happen until I got to Hart my freshman year, and I watched. I know you went through the same thing, where other students could sit down and play 2-5-1, who were horn players, And J-Mac could play, and all
Yeah.
everybody could play. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to learn how to do this,
Same here.
you know. And it really, when I started doing that, G minor 7, C7 to F major, and the different flat 9s and 13s and sharp 11s,
Yeah.
and all those things, and you start finding the colors and the sounds, and then you go, oh, that's what that is.
Exactly.
And for those who are just getting into theory,
Mm-hmm.
so-called music theory, these are sounds that you've heard before.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like someone you went to high school with who was in your 10th grade biology class, and you never knew their name. You just recognize that person. And then years later you meet again, and you go, oh man, that's your name? Yeah, I'm Steve. Man, you're you're G sus 13. Man, you sat right across from me, and oh man, yeah, you changed your hair, but it's like you recognize, I've heard this before.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what that's called, and then you're just labeling sounds in your mind and in your ears, and that's really all it is.
Yeah.
Chick Corea, who I got to work with a lot over the years, which I still have to pinch myself that I did. You would think by the way he plays and composes, and he was so prodigious and such a virtuoso, you would think he would love to discuss theory and what to play over chords and things. And I mean, the years I was around him, he just didn't talk about that very much. He talked about creativity. He talked about communication.
Yeah.
He talked about playing what you hear.
Yeah.
Freedom. He loved Bud Powell. He loved Art Tatum. He loved Red Garland. I mean, he loved standards. He loved bebop, Dizzy Bird, all of that. But again, kind of like J-Mac, but in a different way. He was not satisfied with status quo, and Chick was always reaching for something else,
Yeah.
But I found over the years, daunting as it was to hear him take a solo and then have him look at you, it's your turn, Davis. He used to call me Davissimo, the melody man. And because that, and he liked that I played lyrically, that I played melodically. He used to tell me that all the time, and he'd say, we need you in the band, man. We're playing all this off the wall stuff, and you're so melodic, man, and I love comping behind you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe this. But he gave me confidence, to not try. I didn't have to outdo myself, and it was smarter to play less. Just choose where to play, and then what you get back is unbelievable. And then the music, the rhythm section, the music in total goes way up because you're not trying to fill up everything.
Yeah.
And that has served me very well, and I need to get better at that.
Yeah.
Even more. And then when I get to play next to you, we've always said this, you're such a great foil. I mean, you're very thoughtful, don't get me wrong, but you can, lay out some stuff, man, and it's like I love it because then I can just play some nice things, center things, and then when you go, it's a different it's a contrast.
Yeah.
I think that's fun for the listener.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why
Why am I going to try to play everything you play and outplay? I'm not going to outplay you, man. Good luck. So that's not the point. It's to complement each other, and I think we've done that well.
The instruments lend themselves to that kind of stuff too,
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm doing this, and you got to do all this.
Right.
Deal with the plumbing, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna rewind just a little bit. What made you go to Hart? I mean, you could have went to any school. I mean, even though back then it's not the way it is now, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like every community college has a jazz program.
Yeah.
Back then it was like
weren't as
Berkeley,
many.
probably Indiana, North Texas,
New England Conservatory,
Conservatory.
Rutgers.
Rutgers. So what made you make the
Ithaca.
connection?
No, I didn't audition at Ithaca College. Or maybe I did actually. And,
Had you met
excuse me.
Papa J Mac already before then, or
No, oh no.
You had known of him, though.
But I knew of him from
yeah.
my father's records.
Yeah,
He was on
that's a
several
little
of
more
those.
than I knew before I went.
Yeah,
out.
he was. So.
Yeah.
But no, Hart just looked like a good option. My mom in particular liked the fact. My dad too. They liked the fact that it was a University of Hartford campus. I could take humanities and get an actual education.
Same with my family too. They liked that. The fact that it was like a university.
Yeah, that it wasn't just a conservatory on a street corner in the city, like say Manhattan School, New England Conservatory, or
Yeah.
Peabody.
But no offense to those places.
They're great there, and I wanted to go to a school like that, but I'm glad. I mean, obviously, when I met Professor McLean at my audition, I was still 17 years old, and and it was just him, Mike, in the room. I've told you this story, I think. And
I've forgotten it. I can't wait
and
to hear
it's
it again.
oh my gosh. So I walk in. He says, "Okay, son." He says, "Take your horn out." And I said, naively, I said, "Oh, Mr. McLean, so there's not a rhythm section?" And he said, "No, just me." So man, I thought, oh, okay. So I played "Summertime." For some reason, in D minor, which is not the best key for trombone. I think it was in an Aebersold book in D minor, and I knew the song, and I mean, I didn't really know it, whatever. So I played it, and I remember patting my foot instinctively, and I'm just a little guy from Binghamton, and I played it, and I played something. I played in D minor. I played something. I had no idea why, but it just sounded right. Something I had heard, maybe Sonny Stitt play, or I don't know, or Dexter, And he stopped me. He said, "Ha ha ha, yeah, son." And he went to the piano and he said, "Yeah, man, okay." And then he was smiling, and then he said, "Let me see what you can do with this." And he started playing something on the piano. The best way for me to describe this is, it sounded like a night in Tunisia from another planet, or on steroids, or like a night in Tunisia from outer space, and the rhythmic, the sound and the edge to it. I had never been around anything like that yet. So it was a little frightening, It was like just like intimidating.
Yeah.
But I tried to play, and I played da da dee dee doo doo dee, and he stopped me. He said, "Yeah, da 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 ha ha ha." He said, "Yeah, son," and he said, "Well, he I always edit it to say, 'You got all the stuff happening,' but he didn't say stuff.
Okay.
Different era to the young people." And he said, "Yeah, man, you got all the stuff happening." He said, "Where are your parents?" I said, "Well, my mom and my nana are up in Millard Lobby." He said, "Well, let's go talk to mom." And we went upstairs, and he was wonderful with my mom and my grandmother. He was very charming, of course, and very genuine. And he asked me when I was packing up my horn. Well, first of all, I was looking out the window. It was room 6 or room 5, which became
Down in the cells.
it became our domain back in those days. But little did I know, And I'm looking out, and I see the Hartford skyline, if you could even call it that in those days. There are a few tall buildings, and I'm from Binghamton. We had one and a half tall buildings, so this was, and I'm looking at it like, wow, Hartford looks kind of like a big city. And meanwhile, he sees me looking. I'm thinking this. He says, "Yeah, son, I know. It's a cow pasture." And he said, "But we got a lot going on in Hartford. There's a very wonderful, diverse and community. for the arts and music. We have the Artist Collective. I'm going to take you over there. You know,
Yeah.
oh man, oh,
Wow.
incredible.
Wow.
And so that's how that happened. And then but the other thing he asked me was, he said, "Now, who are you listening to?" And I said, "Well, I really like J.J. Johnson and Curtis Fuller, you know." And he said, "Curtis Fuller," and you know, Curtis is his friend. So he said, "Would you like to take a lesson from Curtis Fuller someday?" And I almost dropped my instrument. Like, that's a possibility. Like, he said, "Yeah." I mean, I didn't say. I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." And I'll be darned, man. My first semester at school, the following year, following fall, maybe it was, I think it was right off the bat. He had Mr. Fuller come and do a master class, and
Wow.
John Hasselback and John was a year ahead of me, and a great trombonist, and Jackie, Professor McLean, told me about him, and said, "You know, we got another kid from up in your neck of the woods, Buffalo, Hasselback." And I had heard of him on the New York State All-State Jazz album. So, man, this is in the mid-'80s. And, that's... So, all of that, I knew I need to be around J Mac, man. And it changed my entire life. It set the course for my whole life. I can't thank Jackie McLean enough.
Man, I hear that.
Yeah.
Once you meet him, you're going to go to that program, right? It's like,
Incredible. And then, you know, I got to meet people like Antoine Roney.
Yeah.
And you and just so many musicians, Ron Sutton and William Fluker and Charlie Saatchi, Richard Bolger, and you know, people who had already gone there were Sue Terry, the Harper brothers, Philip and Winard, had been there briefly just before I got
Saul
there.
had gone there too.
Yes.
Like 10 years before. Saul Rubin
Had been there, a long time before.
Before they even had, I don't even think they really had a guitar teacher when he was there.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I never had a jazz trombone teacher.
That's true, yeah.
I got to study with Ron Borer, who was a great classical player,
Yeah.
but that was okay because Mr. Fuller came once or twice.
Yeah.
Gratian Moncourt came up once or twice, you know, and all the other incredible guest artists. Man, it was more than good enough.
We're gonna have to do like a 3-part of this interview, man. But from what I remember, because when I got up there, you were just finishing. You finished early.
Yeah, I was in my senior
December,
year.
And you were done. And not long after that, you started playing with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, man. So you want to tell us a little bit about that? How that came to be, and what that was like, and what you learned from it?
I mean, obviously, it was a dream come true, and J Mac had told Art about me.
Yeah.
Just told him he had a little trombone player up here in Hartford who's, if you ever need a trombonist, man, he's getting ready to come down to New York, and then I, you know, had to do the rest and moved to New York and introduce myself to Mr. Blakey and sit in with the band and eventually join the Messengers right after Christmas in 1989, and I was there about 8 months, I guess, until Art passed away. He in 1990, in the fall of '90 is when he died.
Yeah.
And the last gigs with Art were that I did anyway were in August in Japan. All I can say succinctly, I mean, there's a lot, you know, to share, but I wasn't ready at all. I was very young and green and not really ready for all that, but that's when it happened, and I wound up being the last jazz messenger, not last trombonist, the last messenger to walk through that door before it closed forever. and so if it didn't happen then, it wasn't going to happen for me. So, Art didn't send me home after the first couple nights, so I stayed and grew, and it was humbling and wonderful, and I was in over my head, but I learned so much, and so many musical seeds were planted for me in those days.
Have you played with a drummer since that felt that way, or that's kind of a strange question, but I mean, it's gotta be.
That's not fair to any of the great drummers.
It's true.
It's
true.
But I can say that of the drummers who were around Buhena in those days and before that, certainly before I got on the scene, and there are several that that had the good fortune to play with. Ralph Peterson, Carl Allen.
You must have played with Jimmy Cobb as well, right?
Oh, I did, but I'm talking about drummers who were
younger generation
disciples of Art Blakey, who were really, and who can consciously try to play like that. Joe Farnsworth can get in there.
Kenny Washington.
Of course. I mean, then you Lewis Nash and Kenny Washington and Cindy Blackman was there a lot. And so there are many drummers who I mean, almost every good drummer, in this day and age, appreciates Art Blakey and was influenced by him in some way. But man, there were times when the few times I got to play with Ralph Peterson, he had me on what turned out to be his last project in 2020, right before the pandemic, right as it was about to happen, and it was a Messengers tribute. He brought a lot of jazz messengers together in the studio, and man, the way he played that day, it really he really put the fire on it, and so, but but art is art. There's nobody. He was so unique, and it's amazing to talk to fellow musicians who also played with him, and almost all of them longer than I did, and certainly before I did. So I love talking to fellow messengers, and hearing their perspective on it and their stories, and
I get this feeling, and I didn't have the opportunity to play with him, but it's like he's back there like a conductor from the drum set. Was it like that when you would take a solo, where you felt like he's kind of guiding you through this journey in a way,
Yeah, like he, for me, early on when I was in the band, I remember playing, and after several other soloists, and I went for another chorus, and I heard audible what I thought was encouragement, and then I heard clear as day, "Get out that hole."
Oh.
Which, of course means wrap it up, buddy. And so after the set, he took me aside, not in front of everybody. He put his arm around me and he pulled me aside. He said, "Hey, Steve, come here." And his face was right next to my face. I'll never forget this. And he put his arm around me and he said, just like this, he said, "You make your statement, you build to a climax, and get the heck out." But he didn't say heck.
Right.
He said, "Simple, right?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, Art." He said, "Well, do it then." And then he went to the bar to greet his fans.
Yeah.
Jazz education, boom.
There you go.
So, make your statement, build to a climax, and get the heck out. Simple, right? We'll do it then.
Yeah.
And I never wanted to hear get out that hole ever again in my life.
Oh my gosh.
And so I learned, to your point, you're right on the money. Art had a way of playing you into the right stuff, and playing, helping you get to the point. And don't practice. Don't use the bandstand to practice. Say something. Make a statement. Build it to a climax, and then get out of there. Wrap it up.
Yeah.
And it's wow, incredible, man. So
What was the other? You had another story about him saying, "Isn't this not the post office or something like that?"
oh yeah, well yeah, he's famous for that one.
Oh, okay.
You don't make a career out of the jazz messengers. He said this is not the post office. So I think he would tell musicians that who maybe,
Yeah.
don't get too comfortable here, because you're not supposed to just stay here forever.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be something to help you
Mhm.
launch your own career. And then I get the next one. Another good one, he said, that I remember really vividly. He looked up at the front line and at the horns, and he said, "I see you all up there trying to play your licks." And then he said, "Once you play it, it's public domain." And I think the message was, you're none of this belongs to you. Don't be so full of yourselves, or to any of us. Just go on and play.
Yeah.
And whatever you're playing, it's been around before, and it's gonna be around. And once you play it, it's public domain. And so I kind of, over the years, whenever I teach a master class, or just certain students who might be ready for this kind of philosophical thing, I always thought of it as, be a good host to the notes, because they're just passing through.
Yeah.
And we have our time
Yeah.
on the timeline of humanity, on planet Earth, with the notes. And the notes and the chords, the rhythms, the sounds, the melodies, they're going to be around long after we're gone, and they've been around for hundreds and thousands of years, So I think if you look at it that way, you might really be open to playing some really good music.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of maybe what Art was trying to impart upon us in that moment. But man, he had some goodies, man. When I joined the band, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, on the slush pump." He's got the mic. He says, "On the slush pump," and I thought, I've never heard that before. With the slush pump, the trombone. "On the slush pump, we have a Connecticut Yankee."
Wow.
He nailed me. And then he says off the mic, "What'd you say your name was?" And I said, "Steve Davis." He said, "Steve Davis, Jackie's boy, the Connecticut Yankee on the slush pump." Can't make it up.
That's a classic.
It's pretty good.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh man,
Steve, we're gonna have to do a part 2, bro.
Memory
because
we got to go play a gig,
we
man.
gotta play a gig and grab
can't
a little
wait,
bite
man.
to eat, and
Yeah.
maybe I'll stop this and we'll play a couple of notes or something just to warm up and.
Sure.
we'll,
Sure.
But I can't thank you enough for sharing some of these stories. I mean, you and I could be here for 5 hours straight. man.
Easy.
Easy.
I can't wait to the next time
Yeah.
to talk about all of our experiences
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And I'd love to interview you
Oh,
for your show.
I'm down for it.
So
man.
maybe we'll do an installment of that too, where you get interviewed
Okay.
and get to talk about, and I think I'm in a good position to do that.
Yeah.
Some of that anyway.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
thank you, brother. Love you,
you,
Rubes,
Steve.
man.
Love
Thank
you,
you,
man.
baby. Thank you, man.
And by the way, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way? Steve Davis?
Yeah, my website is stevedavismusic.com, www.stevedavismusic.com. And you can find, I keep my itinerary updated on there.
Okay.
And then also just my Facebook page. I have a musician's page as well, which is just starting to take off. And then there's Instagram. I'm on there too. So, and people can find my music on the usual outlets, Spotify, Apple Music, and of course YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I record for Smoke Sessions, the label, and also many other projects, and I do want to mention before we wrap up that my wife Abena Coomson Davis has her debut CD
Yes.
out that you play on, Mike.
Yes. Yes.
And it's called Where Is Love, and it's on the WJ3 label, Willie Jones III's great label.
Yeah.
And we had a great time making that record. And my son Tony Davis also plays on several tracks. And Josh Bruno on trumpet and flugelhorn plays on a few. And then, of course, Rick Germanson, the great pianist. Nat Reeves, our dear, well, they're all our dear friends.
Yeah.
The great bassist. And Willie Jones III on drums.
Yeah.
And I play my horn. And Abena put lyrics to a couple of my songs. And she
Beautiful.
interprets standards and wrote one of her own tunes, Abena's Bop. And so, yeah, Where Is Love? Abena Coomson Davis. Check that one out, too.
Cool. Thank you so much, Steve.
Man, thank you, Mike.
Until the next time.
All right.